Thank you all for coming. Wonderful to see such a great crowd tonight for what I perceive to be a wonderful event. This is a well-rehearsed presentation. Jacqui and Bernard have been traveling. This is their 19th city here in Toronto. They've been traveling all around North America on this tour for their new book, Rethinking Money. And we're very happy to be the only Canadian stop on the tour, actually. So so you have a privilege here, but we'll be re-recording it, so you'll be able to send it to all your friends in other parts of Canada. Tonight we're going to hear a subject that is, with just a few exceptions around the world, a necessary part of being human in this day and age. Whether we like it or not, money is the central force behind most of our major life decisions. The career we choose to undertake, even the kind of food we purchase. Money has a magical quality, really, that influences what we are motivated to do or not to do. And those who control money, therefore, have an ability to control the behaviors of large segments of society. But as we'll hear tonight, the money currently controlled by private banks and governments is not the only kind of money that can motivate us. There are thousands of different monetary systems being used around the world today. And these currencies have been designed to meet many different kinds of goals. The range of options is truly extraordinary, as we'll hear tonight, and the results are equally as extraordinary. Complementary currencies have been used to clean up garbage in favelas in Brazil, to take care of the elderly in Japan, and they've been used to avoid high interest rates from banks and help people travel around the world using air miles. These currencies work alongside the standard currency, like the Canadian dollar, and are therefore not considered alternative, but complementary. Bernard has introduced the term monetary ecosystem to this train of thought, and that's really was what triggered my interest to begin with as an environmentalist. And I hope that he will expand on that idea tonight, this ecosystem idea. Here in Toronto, we're almost ready to launch our own alternative complementary currency, shall I correct myself? Which is a time bank, which we'll be doing at the Centre for Social Innovation, where we have shared office space. If you'd like to get your feet wet, as Victoria Swappley metaphor before us, to get involved in that, please let me know. I understand there's a time bank being launched in Guelph, actually, as well, so it's very exciting. So these ideas are taking place around our ecosystems here in Canada. And this presentation here tonight is really just to trigger that start of that conversation and see where we can go with it. So if you are inspired, please stick around, have a discussion with us, or just email us, and let's have a meeting and let's discuss what we can do here, because really these are bottom-up programs that have to be started by people like us, and the government is not going to do it for us. So it's really up to us to do that. So without further ado, let me get to our speakers. They have, as I mentioned, a brand new book called Rethinking Money. So if you are interested in the subject and you like what you hear tonight, please buy a book outside. It's a brand new hardcover edition, and you'll get it signed by the authors after the event. I believe it's $33 with tax. That's Canadian currency, not a complimentary one. Bernard himself, Bernard Lietaer, is one of the world's most knowledgeable minds in the game when it comes to the subject matter. He's authored 16 books on related subjects, as well as having designed dozens of currencies, all the way from global proposals, like Terra, to small-scale systems that can work in a very small community or neighborhood. His co-author, Jacqui Dunne, is an award-winning journalist from Ireland originally, and she's the founder of Down Resource, which is a very exciting organization. I was finding out more about. They work on renewable energy projects, nuclear power solutions, very exciting organization, so I can't wait to hear more about what they do as they progress in their development. So with that, I welcome you to put your hands together, and for our guests, Bernard Lietaer and Jacqui Dunne.
Now we're here.
Now we're here. Good. So, this evening, we're going to talk about a topic called money. And we think we understand money, but in fact, you'd be surprised, even the experts in the field do not understand money. We're all like fish swimming in water, and very few fish can actually describe what their environment is like because they're born in it, they live in it, and they die in it. And we say to you tonight that money permeates every single aspect of your life. Not only that, it actually informs certain behaviors. And as we're going to show you this evening, informs behaviors that are fundamentally unsustainable. That the monetary system itself, the conventional monetary system itself, is unsustainable. And furthermore, it has devastating effects on ecological sustainability. So, who creates money? This is going to be a test. Okay, I want a show of hands. How many people believe that government creates money? Okay.
Okay.
Are you sure about that? Can we see the hands again? Okay, make a commitment. Okay, I see that commitment. Okay, how many people believe that it's central government, central banks rather, that actually create money? Okay. And our final question.
Is it anybody else? Anybody? Okay, a minority.
A minority. So do you think it's private banking cartel? Okay, the last group have it. Our money is actually created by a private cartel, a monopoly of banks. Whether you have a Canadian dollar in your hand, a US dollar, a euro, a peso, whatever it might be, it's all the same type of money. And by that we mean it is created out of bank debt, and it has a positive interest rate. What does that mean? It means that money gets created the moment you go into your bank and you take out a loan, maybe a loan for a mortgage for your house, maybe a loan for a motorbike or a car. And the chap or the woman behind the desk that's making an assessment of your credit worthiness is doing it because the interest that you're going to pay over time is not created. Money that you will have in your loan is created, but the interest on that loan is not created. This means that you have to go into society and compete with others in order to bring back that interest, to pay your loan back to the bank, which means part and parcel of the system, somebody has to go bankrupt.
There are 7 effects of the conventional money system and the fact that it is a monopoly, that there's no other game in town, that are directly incompatible with sustainability. The first one is actually something that Jacqui already mentioned. It's competition. When you pay back interest, when anybody pays back interest, he or she uses someone else's principal. Okay? So you are by definition in competition. The second thing is it creates short-term thinking. I will explain each one of those points in more detail, but I'll just give you the list of them so you can actually have an overview. The third one is anybody who believes you can have steady growth without changing the money system hasn't understood how money works. Again, for the same reason that Jacqui said. If you just have steady growth, everybody will go bankrupt because there will not be the money available to pay the interest on the loan. If everybody reimburses their loan, there will be a huge hole in the ground, which is the interest still left. So we cannot stop growing. The next one is it concentrates wealth. Finally, it feeds greed. The only way of having certainty is accumulate a hell of a lot of money. And finally, it devalues social capital. There's also, in the fact that it is private creation of money, a process that actually amplifies the business cycle. Now let me show you each one of those points. We're all competing with each other to pay back money that actually doesn't exist. If everybody has enough money, the money would become worthless. It will be hyperinflation. I'm going to quote from a textbook of monetary economics. Bank that money needs to be scarcer than its usefulness. Okay? It's built in. The scarcity is not in the world. The scarcity is in the money that puts us between us and the world. The second one is short-term thinking. Those of you who know what compound interest is how many of you know that? Okay, the majority. So let's just apply how that works. If you have 100, let's say we have a world in which I'm going to invest in 2 possible trees. We are in Canada, there are lots of trees around. You either have a pine, that's worth, say, $100, and it grows in 10 years, I'm making the numbers simple. And you have an oak, that's worth $1,000 over 100 years. I'm assuming that there's no inflation here. So you actually should be indifferent, right? I can plant 10 times the pines and harvest them and arrive at the end in 100 years at $1,000. Easy. In comes the financial viewpoint. If you have an interest of 5%, the $100 10 years from now is equal to $61.39 today. Another way of putting it is, if you put $61.39 in a bank account for 10 years, in 10 years' time, that will be worth $100. So $100, 10 years from now is the same as $61.39. What happens to our oak? The $1,000 is worth $7.60. In a society where there's a currency with positive interest rate, the future doesn't matter. Simply, you discount it to oblivion. Anything more than 20 years in practice is considered not existing. So that is a systemic aspect that actually comes directly from the way money is created, given that in every creation of the currency there is interest built in. That's the result. So if you want to be rational, that's what you do. In this society, you don't plant oaks. You harvest old growth, but you plant pines. And by the way, you do that in every other field. Compulsory growth. There is no choice then to grow. Or otherwise, everybody goes bankrupt. There's no choice to stop growing. And again, it has to do with interest, given that every money that we have has interest due on it by someone. If you stop growing, that's it. You will never be able to pay back your loans. Everybody goes bankrupt. What is interest? It's the transfer of money, of resources, from people who have to borrow to people who have more money than they need. Right? By definition, it's a transfer from the majority to a minority. That is one of the factors, I'm not saying it's the only one, that actually creates a systemic concentration of wealth. If you're wealthy, you have to make some very stupid things in order not to remain so. Okay? You have to take risks, in other words. But you can live in a world without risk by just investing in bonds. Now, the result of that is we have had a whole debate about the 99% versus the 1%. Actually, the polarization is much stronger. This is 1 out of 10,000, right? And they owe more than a quarter. They're about 30%. The next 1 out of 1,000 has another 19%. So you don't even get to 1%, and this is what's left for everybody else. Concentration is extraordinary. How do you obtain some control over your future in a society when there is a monopoly of a single currency? Well, by accumulating a lot of money. Greed is actually encouraged systematically because it's the only way of facing the future with some comfort. Finally, social capital. Social capital is the capacity to address problems within a group, within a community, within your network, without actually needing to pay official money. Okay? Because you have relationships, you have reputation, that makes it possible for you to obtain goods and services or help to obtain those things from a community, from a network that you have a social capital with. All the things we mentioned so far are completely incompatible with that. You know, the competition, the building competition. By the way, just think about probably the strongest nucleus of social capital is a family, supposedly. a very good recipe to blow up a family is you put $1 million on the table, and a normal family come back 2 weeks later, and everybody's fighting. So it's really not a neutral tool. The process of creation of money has also a difficulty, which creates uncertainty for everybody. And by the way, even for the financial system itself. When you have, there is something called the business cycle, and it has to do with inventories. You make a lot of cars, there are more cars than people are buying, you accumulate a bit of excess stock, then you want to work it off, and therefore you actually buy less of the stuff until you work it off. Now, what happens, because the money is created privately, the bank, by definition, whenever there is a boom, they throw more money at it. Whenever that moves, like for example, the real estate in the United States was the last of those bubbles. So it amplifies to the peak. And on the other hand, when there's a recession, you can't find money for any purpose, even the most logical and solid one. So it amplifies the cycle on both sides. Central banks are supposed to counteract that and try desperately, but it isn't working. I mean, Bernanke has been pumping money out of the system like crazy, and all banks do it, put it back to the central bank and deposit. So nothing happens. Same thing happens in Europe. There are 600 billion euros currently deposited by the banking system at the central bank. They don't need it. So the system is not stabilizing itself, it's creating instability, which creates uncertainty for everybody. So here's a summary. Competition among its users, short-term thinking, compulsory growth, concentration of wealth, greed, and all this together generates the loss of capital, of social capital. And the uncertainty is amplified because of the process of creating money. So this is a picture that illustrates the consequences. We're taking a world that actually is not bad looking and transforming it into a garbage can because of the uncertainties, the short-term thinking particularly, but all the rest as well.
So then this begs the question, is there another way? Is there a way to rethink money? And the book that we have co-authored chronicles very ordinary people like you and me, maybe with a lot less education, coming together within their community to have very deep conversations and start thinking outside the box. So the first thing you've got to understand about money is an agreement. Money is an agreement within a community to use something standardized as a medium of exchange. And if you look at history, stones have been used, rocks have been used, axes have been used, tobacco leaves have been used. But communities are coming together and saying, okay, what are we going to do by creating a currency? Because new agreements are now possible. So they're thinking out of the box.
It's a precondition.
You've got to think out of the box. So if we go back to our fishes swimming in the water analogy, the normal economy goes along here very, very nicely, rolls along with the different currents. But sticking out are things called unmet needs and unused resources. And communities are now thinking, how do we link these unused resources with these unmet needs? And we call these complementary currencies or cooperative currencies or local currencies, because they do not replace the official system, they work in tandem. How many of you use frequent flyer miles? How many of you belong to a complementary group like Toronto Dollars or a Time Bank? Okay. So some of you have already been using complementary currencies, and the most easiest one to understand are frequent flyer miles. About 40 years ago, American Airlines decided it really wanted to get loyalty. So what they did, they invented the frequent flyer mile programs, and with you earning points over time, you can get a free seat, free ticket to travel to Cancun or wherever you want to go. And what is interesting about the frequent flyer mile example is that they can process billions and billions of airline miles very, very cheaply, very efficiently, very, very quickly, and they're changing behaviors. So what is interesting for us to think about as there's convergence now of access to computing, payment systems, and a desire to start thinking out of the box, what could be done on a societal level? We started chronicling these complementary currencies that are for social purpose. Way back here, there were 2. And the last major count was back there in 2005, and they were somewhere around about 4,000. These are mature systems. We say there's somewhere around about 550, 6,000 mature systems all over the world addressing social problems. Let's take an example of some of these things. Here is a beautiful park in the town of Curitiba, Brazil. And this beautiful park, which has a botanical garden, is perhaps nothing particularly noteworthy, but when you come to understand that this now stands as one of about 13 or 14 beautiful gardens in that city, actually stood here on this garbage tip. So 25 years ago, Jaime Lerner was mayor of this city, and he had a huge problem. There had been an influx of people into Curitiba in order to find work. They had built favelas, which are shanty towns, and they were not able to collect the garbage because the little pathways in between the various houses were so narrow that the trucks couldn't go up. So garbage was strewn absolutely everywhere. There were rats, there were diseases, all kinds of problems. He also realized that he had a bus service that was not operational to capacity. This is the bus service today, 25 years later. It's probably one of the best in the world. But as you can see, people come in here, they file in, and they prepay their journey with little tokens, somewhat like the tokens you have here on your massive transit system. And then in a matter of moments, all these the bus turns up, all these doors open up, and about 50 people can get on in a matter of seconds, and off they go. These are the people coming off the massive transit. So Jaime Lerner sent out a notice to the favelas and said, anybody who brings in a bag of garbage that is sorted between paper, glass, and cans will get a token to ride on the bus service. Lo and behold, within about 2 to 3 weeks, the favelas were absolutely picked clean of sorted out garbage. And later on, they started using the buses, and then later on in the service, local farmers started accepting this token in payment for locally grown vegetables and fruits. And I don't know if you can see it terribly well on this box, and please forgive me how I'm going to wreck this title in Portuguese, but it's leite que não leite, which means garbage that is not garbage. So basically, garbage became money in this town. And I think my favorite of all things here are fishermen. They go out into the bay of Curitiba, and on days that the fish are not biting, they actually bring in bags and bags of garbage that they've trawled, and they can actually turn them in for tokens. What Jaime Lerner did with this garbage currency and several other very brilliantly designed currencies that linked an unused resource with an unmet need was, in a matter of about 5 years, the city of Curitiba had a standard of living that was a third higher than their fellow Brazilians in other parts of the country. So these are not just cute little things. These actually can really make a huge difference. So this is an example of one of 13 parks built by local money in the city of Curitiba, Brazil. Here's another example, and this is an example of a currency that was designed by my co-author Bernard. And the town of Ghent, which is in Flanders, the region of Flanders in Belgium, had a problem. There was a neighborhood that was sort of ostracized. A lot of immigrants were there, pretty miserable place to live, a lot of social housing, a lot of graffiti, it's a tough neighborhood, to put it bluntly. So mostly Turkish immigrants. And the town itself got really concerned and said, we've got to do something, and we don't have a great deal of money to address it. So they decided to send out a survey to the population living in this neighborhood and asked, what would you like? What would you like to do with your neighborhood? And interestingly enough, they got an overwhelming response saying, you know what we would absolutely love is to have a little garden ourselves. Because we come from the countryside, we're living on the 20th floor of this high-rise building, all we're looking at is cement. We would love to have our own little plot of garden so we can enjoy it ourselves, we can plant vegetables, and we can teach our children how to garden. So that was the starting point, the dream of a garden. This is the area where an old factory, a disused factory was. They leveled the factory. And as you can see here, you can actually see the old original concrete floor of the factory. And you can see these little plots of garden. They're about 4 meters by 4 meters. Now, what's interesting about these plots of land is you can only rent them. And interesting enough, you cannot rent them in euros, the national currency. You can only rent them in the local currency, which are turcas. And as you can see here, it's a paper currency. As you can see, there's an example of the social housing on the one turca. That's another emblem of the city itself. And the people then ask, well, how can we earn these turcas? And the city lists a number of activities where people can earn different amounts of turcas depending on what they're doing. So, for example, if they clean up the neighborhood, they get so many turcas. And these are not actors, ladies and gentlemen. These are real photographs of real people cleaning up their neighborhood. If they put a flower pot or a flower box on the windowsill facing onto the street, they earn a certain amount of turcas. If they put a little label said no advertising on their postal box, they earn a turca. I think we have some other pictures here. This is them beautifying their neighborhood. They're planting flowers. So the interesting thing about Ghent is that this program started about 2 years ago. And in the first year, the money circulated, the 50,000 euro budget, was amplified 3 times by using this complementary currency. And they're estimating by next year, they will actually amplify the work being done 20 times over. And it has been so successful. Not only do they have more volunteers that they know what to do with, more wealthier neighborhoods are looking at this neighborhood in Ghent to say, oh my heavens, we'd like to have something like that in our neighborhood. I'm going to run through this very, very quickly about healthcare. Or would you like to talk about it, Bernard?
Yes.
Yep.
How many of you are concerned about healthcare? Actually, there are a few of you who are not, and that's healthy. In America, I can tell you, your neighbors, it's 100%. Okay? And they're right. This is a statistic that shows the expenses per capita on healthcare. The United States is there. Canada is here. So you're spending about half, but you have about 3 times better satisfaction. Congratulations. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it demonstrates that there's actually no relationship with the quantity of money you spend on healthcare and satisfaction from healthcare. Now, one of the things one does when one looks at an approach on systemic causes of a problem is that you very often end up with a currency. That's what happened with Jaime Lerner, actually, that Jacqui was talking about in Curitiba. He was a systems thinker. Actually an architect in training, but architects are trained to think in systems. So here is a statistic that's interesting that correlates the increase from weight, excess weight, to the probability of a particular series of diseases. For example, if you have 30 pounds overweight, you have about 142% higher probability of having diabetes. Okay? And if it's 90 pounds, it's 500%. So the way we currently look at that is treat diabetes without looking at systemic cause behind it. Now, the statistics are available. We can now actually work with those numbers and start doing something with it. What will we do? The starting point is to be aware that none of the countries that I showed you, actually none of the countries in the world, has something called healthcare. What they have instead is medical care. It's not the same thing. Okay? Now, when you start looking at some of the things that have come out, that preventive care, this is a statistic coming from a study done by Johnson & Johnson, who are suppliers to the medical care system. Investing $1 million in preventive care, in preventive medicine, saves you $3 million within the next 2 years, up to $10 million. But that's not what the medical care system does. They're not interested in that. They're not trained for that. Doctors are not trained in preventive care, preventive medicine. They don't know. So it's a massive market failure. In fact, what is the incentive scheme within the medical care system, to put it bluntly, you're interesting at two conditions, that you're sick and alive. If you're dead, you're not interesting anymore. And if you're healthy, you're not interesting. So this is actually a system that keeps sick people alive or makes people sick and keeps them alive. The 70% of all chronic diseases have been proven to have as origin a medical intervention. So we really are not in the right track. So we need to find another way. Okay? Here is how it could work. By the way, this is being implemented this year in Ireland. I'll go back to that in a few minutes. It's not just theory. You remember what Jacqui mentioned about the behavior change that the airline has proven with the airline mile system? You can actually make people do things that they wouldn't do normally, not spontaneously. Good. That's the starting point. So we have here a wellness alliance, which plays the same role as an airline alliance. They manage a currency to change behavior patterns. Now, who needs to be part of the Wellness Alliance? It needs to be the organizations that actually save money from having healthy people. No need to put in a hospital there. Okay? What you need to put in is the insurance industry, the local corporations. When someone is even not the employee himself, but his wife or his children are sick, it actually changed behavior patterns in business. That's been proven. So you actually have an interest in that, and similarly, the local authorities, the city administration, has an interest in having a healthy population. When they're healthy, they are actually more active and do good things, including economic things. So it's this Wellness Alliance that would issue the wellness tokens for doing certain things. For example, obesity reduction, right? For every pound that you lose, you get 10 wellness tokens. What do you do with the wellness tokens? Well, there are a number of businesses that actually are in the preventive care, the preventive medicine field. Okay? So you can spend them there. And what do the business there do with it? Well, first of all, they can get healthy themselves, can't they? And the second thing they could do is go to the Wellness Alliance and cash in the wellness tokens at a tariff that reflects the improvement on probability of reduction of the costs of having sick people. If you reduce the probability by 20% of having the heart attack that cost $100,000, you're saving $20,000. $10,000 are used for the reimbursement, for the currencies being paid back, and the other $10,000 are kept by the Wellness Alliance people to reduce their costs. This model is being implemented this year in the school system, first in Ireland. A third of all the school kids are going to participate in this this year. On the simple basis that the Prime Minister has declared, look guys, sorry, but we can't afford the medical care system anymore. It's just something that we can afford. We need to do something else. So that's one example of another type of currency than what we've been talking about.
Another big issue is how do we take care of our graying population? And Japan really hit the wall on this topic about 20 years ago. And they designed a currency called Furiai Kipu, which means quite literally carrying friendship tickets. And how it works is very, very simple. I go down the road and take care of the elderly man, the elderly gentleman that lives close to me. I may take him, for example, shopping. I might drive him to the dentist. I might help him write a letter to his insurance company. And for every hour that I spend helping him out, I get an electronic credit in my Furiai Kipu account, which I can keep and use when I've got the flu and I need somebody to pick up my kids, or I may save it up when I'm much older and need the same type of care myself. And interestingly enough, in this particular system, I can transfer my credits to another part of Japan for somebody to come in and look after my mother. What is really, really beautiful about this system is that the elderly they surveyed love it, because not only can they live in their home with greater dignity, friendships are growing up within the neighborhood. Intergenerational friendships are happening, because usually it's a much younger person that's coming in to take care of the person. And it is not costing the government anything. Currently in Japan, there are almost 500 systems operational right through Japan, with 2 central clearing houses to making sure that the system runs fairly and accurately. This Furiai Kipu is actually a time-based currency. An hour of time equals 1 Furiai Kipu. And in the United States, and I believe here in Canada too, I'm not sure how many are in Canada, but in the United States they have time banking, where each hour spent is equal to 1 time dollar. There are about 400 systems networked right through the United States. They were founded back in 1980 by Edgar Kahn, a very eminent attorney in Washington, D.C. There are now about 1 to 2 new systems popping up every single week in the United States. And I think the model of time banking is now operational in about 37 countries right around the world. The biggest US-based time bank is actually in the United States, in New York. It is blessed by Mayor Bloomberg, and it's called the Visiting Nurses Time Bank, which is somewhat akin to what Furiai Kipu do, and it's operational through all the 5 boroughs of New York. And we're actually thinking that our dear hosts here might actually think of the tool library, maybe introducing some complementary currencies, such maybe as time dollars, to actually rent their equipment. Very quickly, I'm going to discuss the WEIR, because we've dealt here with social purpose, and there are very interesting applications for business. And one of the most fascinating stories actually comes out from Switzerland. And about 80 years ago, 17 businessmen were sitting around in a beer hall, absolutely depressed, because each of them had received a letter from their respective banks, either that their credit line had been completely cut or their credit line was dramatically reduced. And they're saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Sort of sounds familiar. So they realized that each of these 17 guys, they were guys at the way back 80 years ago, realized that they were actually borrowing money from the bank in order to pay each other for their services or their products. And they decided, lo and behold, let's create our own currency. Perhaps, Bernard, you'd like to explain how it works?
They call it the WEIR, W-I-R, which in German means us. 1 WEIR equals 1 Swiss franc. The only difference is that I sold something to you for 1,000 Swiss francs worth. Well, I have 1,000 WEIR credits and you have 1,000 WEIR debit. If you would be selling something to me for the same amount, we would have done a barter deal, right? However, if with my credit I can buy something from Jacqui, and you can sell something to the gentleman at the end there, we've created a currency between the four of us, haven't we? You don't have to go to the bank. We just did it ourselves. And it's perfectly legal as long as you pay your taxes on it, and the taxes will be paid in Swiss francs. This system actually has been proven to be the secret for the stability of the Swiss economy. Because nobody ever talks about it. Okay? I mean, it's kind of like... So the Swiss have been using now for 80 years two currencies. Why is that the case? Well, the simplest way to explain it is the following. As a businesswoman, if I were offering you, giving the choice between 1,000 Swiss francs and 1,000 lire, what will you do? You will always take the Swiss francs. Because with the Swiss francs, not only can you get the sale done, but you can also pay your taxes. You can take vacations in Mexico, and you can buy stuff in China. With the other one, with the lire, you have to buy stuff among 75,000 businesses. Now, 75,000 businesses in Switzerland, there's a hell of a lot you can buy, okay? But it's still not the same liquidity. So you prefer the Swiss franc. Now, what happens? When you have a boom period, everything goes well. Everybody has a lot of Swiss francs. Well, when I come to you and say, by the way, I went to buy 1,000 lire, something from you, I may say, look, my staff is fully busy, come back in a month, But when you come back today, in a recession, and my staff is half idle, I grab it. So what happens is when the Swiss economy is doing very well, the lire is low, but when the Swiss economy goes down, this goes up. And it stabilizes the economy. This has been proven in 3 peer-reviewed articles published in economic journals. Okay, this is not opinion. Systemically, what happens is this actually balances out more effectively than what central banks do. Because the central banks do top-down. They have to affect the whole economy. Here it's us, small business people, who are deciding ourselves to do it, and when, and how much. So it actually stabilizes the economy much better. By the way, 85-90% of all jobs, private jobs, are in small businesses. So what I'm talking about is directly related to the stabilization of employment.
Another currency that Bernard has designed is particularly interesting. The new president of Lithuania, a woman, decided that she wanted her country to become a learning country. She wanted to foster intergenerational connectivity. And she wanted her people to become trilingual. Most speak, obviously, Lithuanian, maybe Polish and Russian, but she wanted them to learn like Chinese, Spanish, English. And she wanted to make sure that people in her country became proficient about using the internet. What is interesting about Lithuania is the following 2 things. One is they've got a couple of things going for them. They've got the highest penetration of fiber optic broadband, and also everybody has a mobile phone and with some SIM cards. So this is how the currency works. The central premise is that everybody has a bucket list. Everybody has a dream that they want to fulfill. It may be, for example, going to Japan, learning Zen Buddhism. It may be going to Kenya, for example, and living with the Maasai warriors for a while, maybe coming here to Canada. Whatever their dream may be, and they make an agreement with the Lithuanian Learning Foundation. They say, well, I can speak pretty fluent English. I'm very happy to give lessons in English. And in return, say, for 3,000 hours of English lessons, I would like my dream to come true, which is to go to Kenya and live with the Maasai warriors for a month, for example. So they make the deal, and I, as a citizen, go off and I start teaching English. What is interesting here is, your Dora account is your mobile phone number, by the way. What is interesting here is that nonprofits get really involved here. And what we will see here is in the cooperative, complementary society and economy, nonprofits play the role that in competitive society, in the dollar society, that firms or corporations play. So there's a great way for nonprofits to really start making some money and really be very, very active in the economy, in this complementary economy. So a nonprofit could actually be surveying how the program is being worked, it's being run efficiently and well. Also, a lot of nonprofits have a learning quotient in their mandate. For example, it could be around sustainability, and you could take courses or teach courses in permaculture, for example. Anyway, go off, you teach your hours, and then you go back to the Lithuanian Foundation and say, gee whiz, I've completed my contract with you, and the Lithuanian Learning Foundation puts the whole package together with frequent flyer miles or whatever else, sponsorships, to make sure that I can have my end of the bargain, which is my dream come true of going to Kenya. The application of this is actually quite astounding, because all kids that get involved in this over the age of 12 are invited to teach older folks how to use the internet, social media, etc. And what's interesting here is that the person who's teaching and the person who's learning earn DORAs. And I think the application that I find most heartwarming is what they suggest kids under the age of 12 do. And they're invited to find somebody within their community, an older person, and ask them this very, very provocative question: what is it in your life that you have learned that you think would be of value to me? And out of that comes a dialogue which can be recorded either as an essay or multimedia, whatever they want to do. And both the person purveying their wisdom and the young child that's recording it earn DORAs, and there's a big competition given various age groups, and the best are chosen and they get bonus DORAs. So this currency shows that it is then possible to change behaviors by linking an unused resource. And when you think about all the unused resources we have in the world and the absolutely gazillion amount of unmet needs, it is really possible to very creatively design currencies. And notice here with all these are not a push currency, like I go and dream up a currency and then go try and market and sell it. In all these cases, it was a pull. It was answering a need of the person, the need of the country, the need of the community. So spontaneously, there was this spark, and people really wanted to get involved.
Now, you may think that this is kind of nice ideas, cute, you know. And how many of you actually have had a course in economics? A majority. So what I'm going to tell you now is trying to deprogram what they told you, okay? Because they told you a bunch of things, particularly by never mentioning it, that are actually not true. One of them, one key one, is that you need a single currency. Modern money is one currency per country, okay? By the way, the systemic purpose of taxes is not to actually fund the government's activities, as we have been told. It is to give value to a currency that otherwise wouldn't have any. If the governments did not impose that you pay taxes only in currency that's created through bank debt, nobody would bother using Canadian dollars. So that's the first little thing that needs to be clarified, okay? The power of the government to choose which currency it gives value, whatever currency it will choose, including a currency that it creates itself, for example. It can do that. There's nobody impeding to do that. And it would change everything, okay? Now, there's another thing they didn't tell you, or didn't tell us, because I also took courses of economics in the good old times. It's about entropy now, and about complexity theory. We know now that we can measure the sustainability of any complex flow network. What is a complex flow network? Well, it's a network in which something flows. and which is not just a linear one, a tube, when you have many connections, many nodes. For example, a natural ecosystem, a forest, has a complex flow network in which biomass flows. You have the sun hitting the planet, you have plants growing, you have animals eating plants, you have animals eating animals, we eat it all. So we kind of have a flow network in which biomass flows. There are other examples. Electrical distribution systems. The electrons that go through your stuff here is a complex flow network with electrons. An economy is a complex flow network in which money flows, right? So all these things have something in common, that they're complex flow networks. Now, a breakthrough, which is in the last 6 years, I've been working with a team in the United States headed by Bob Ulanovich, and I see that one of our colleagues is actually present here. He has been able to measure the sustainability of any complex flow network on the basis of the fact that there are two emerging properties need to be in balance. You need to have efficiency and you need to have resilience. Efficiency is the capacity for a system to process volume. Resilience is the capacity for a system to adapt, to change to new circumstances. A drought, an attack, a disease, whatever. And they need to be in balance. You need to have not too much of either one. Now, there are two key structural variables that determine this efficiency and this resilience, and therefore the sustainability. One of them is diversity. This is a diverse forest, grain forest. This is high interconnectivity, an animal that eats just about anything. This is a squirrel photographed in Central Park in New York. For 50 generations, it hasn't seen anything natural, right? Now, compare that to a monoculture. This is low diversity. This is more efficient. This produces more volume of cubic feet of timber per year. Okay? But it doesn't have any resilience. You drop a match, you lose a piece of glass, it's all gone. Similarly, the panda is very cute, lovable, but he eats only one type of bamboo. So it makes it very vulnerable. Now, in natural ecosystems, resilience is much more important than efficiency. In human-made systems, the only thing that counts is efficiency. So don't be surprised that this system is not sustainable. It is unstable. We have had 425 countries between 1970 and 2010 going through a major crash, systemic crash. These are statistics from the IMF. That's 10 per year. If you had a car like that, would you not send it back to the manufacturer? Or kind of ask them to rethink? Why is all this important now? A couple of pictures will replace a lot of words. The first picture is this one. You can look at it from top down, you can look at it from the bottom up, from the political right or from the political left, but something isn't working and hasn't been working for a while. By the way, there have been 48 total collapses, but before 1971, before the change of the system introduced by Nixon, according to the Kindleberger study. So, since the beginning of modern money, of this monoculture, it has been unstable, repeatedly. Okay. Second thing is this picture. The interesting part about it is that it's not coming from a French leftist journal, which you could suspect, but from The Economist. Okay? And it would, believe me, affect Canada, right? I mean, you're not going to have your neighbor get in trouble without having some consequences. That's the third picture. The conventional solutions aren't working. They have not been working for a while. And the sooner we realize that we need to think out of the box, the better it is. Don't hope that the guys, the big boys, will solve the problems of your community for you. This will not happen. So it's better to start thinking yourself. Finally, this is the broader picture. When you look at human history, 5,000 years of well-documented history, and you classify in one box all patriarchal societies. That means Sumer, Babylon, Greece, Rome, and since the Renaissance time, since the 1500s, Western Europe, and then the rest of the world, the modern world, spread out over it. They have something in common. This is the same money system as we do. They use top-down controlled single currency with positive interest rates. The form of that currency has varied over time. But interest was invented in Sumer, and the first writings, the oldest text, human text that we have, they date back to 3200 BC, are actually loan agreements, financial deals. So now that currency, that monopoly currency, single system, has been doing a couple of good things. Let's acknowledge that. One of them is it has created the industrial age. Without that currency, I don't believe we would have seen the industrial age happen. But also, it has created instability, it concentrates the wealth, and it destroys community. These are three of the examples of the 6 side effects of that we talked about, modern money. Now, if you want to know whether you're in a patriarchal society, there is actually a very simple shorthand to find out. If the vision of the divine is a guy with a beard who has done it all without a girlfriend, you are probably in a patriarchal society. Okay? Now, second point, there are societies that have not been patriarchal. There are 2 main ones that we have enough data about to actually find out what they did about the money system. One of them is dynastic Egypt. The nice role in ancient Egypt in the divine level was not Osiris. He was the poor guy who got in trouble and being saved repeatedly by Isis out of love. Okay? So the nice role is played by a lady. The second example, more surprisingly, is from the 10th to the 13th century, the central Middle Age period in Western Europe, where it coincides with the period of the cathedrals, the building of all the cathedrals. And they were dedicated to a lady. They were not dedicated to the Pope or to Jesus Christ. They were Notre Dame, Our Lady. Now, in those societies, you had a dual currency system. One currency identical to this one, which was used to trade with people you don't know, long distance. And then a second currency, where all the rules are the opposite of the first one. It's bottom up, it doesn't have interest. It has even demurrage, actually a negative interest rate, so that nobody would accumulate the currency. And that is what you're doing within your own community. So this dual currency system was systemically implemented. It created stability for centuries, no boom and bust cycles. In the case of Egypt, for over 1,000 years. In the Central Middle Ages, there was not a single boom and bust cycle for 250 years. The first time it happened was when they left, when they stopped doing it. And it was also the period where the little people, the bottom of society, was actually living the best quality of life in history. It was even better, surprisingly, than today. We know it from the bones of being unearthed of ordinary people in the 12th century. Ordinary people were healthier. Women were a centimeter taller in London in the 12th century than today. Men have caught up with the size of the Saxons of the 12th century only in the last 30 years. So,
I think the interesting thing to point out here, folks, is that these cathedrals that were built in Northern Europe between the 10th and the 12th century was built with public money. It wasn't
local public money.
Local public money. It wasn't, by the Roman Catholic Church or by governments. It was by local people, and that's a very important thing to underscore here.
So it's time that we perhaps do our own cathedrals, and they don't have to be temples. As long as there are people who are not fed, who can't read on this planet, I think we have cathedrals to build. But don't expect to do it only with conventional money. We have the technologies, and what we are describing is, in fact, a driven process, a process that's been driven by the information age. It started before the crash of 2007, 2008. It's just being accelerated by it, but it has been on its way now for 30 years. There's some shifts that are going on that are highly significant, and that we can put our energy in. And it requires a new balance between masculine and feminine energy, between competition and cooperation. And this value system will take root in the conventional world, in the physical world, only if we have currencies that support such value systems. So thank you very much.
We'd love to take some of your questions, and I'd just like to give a quick promo for the book. The book is not an economic textbook, far from it. It's a lot of real stories of very real people thinking out of the box. So it's very anecdotal. It's, I believe, easy to read. At least I've been told it has been. So if you really want to...
It's easier to read than any of my other books. Thanks to Jacqui. Okay?
Thank you. But I do think if you really want to understand more deeply some of the concepts we talked about, how we got our conventional system, and some of the really exciting stories of, as I said, ordinary people doing extraordinary things by rethinking money, I think you'll find this a very, very engaging book. So we would love to take questions. I'm sure you have some.
The way we can do it, Jacqui, we'll set up a mic here. So this